with what's been going on in the culture around the COVID stuff, the virus, lots of people, suddenly having a little economic shock, and watching the different responses to fear that people have been coming up with. And I thought about the study in the book that was on masturbation and oxytocin and what it did to do stress relief, and started to look at what are the other things that I know from my own practice and that we know from science in general that help us auto-generate oxytocin. Now, what oxytocin does in women is it regulates cortisol, or the stress hormone. So what I'd like to do is to officially start with a small meditation on that is proven to generate oxytocin. So before I get into the science and how all of that stuff works, I thought we'd just prepare a little bit by quieting down. Big inhale. Fill up the lungs. Exhale. And as you're doing that, I want you to think about a person who's looked on you with kindness in your life. Someone who makes you laugh, someone you find attractive, someone you adore, someone who's given you a blessing at some point in your life. Maybe a teacher or a parent or a grandparent. Maybe a lover, a spouse. And let those images of the people you've held dear roll through your mind. Go a little step further to a positive memory. Sometime you felt playful, alive, whole in your body. Now, if we continue that meditation, that imagery for 15 minutes, you would have the first experience of what you can do to auto-generate the oxytocin release, because a pleasant mental experience is one of the first things in releasing what is called the love hormone. So oxytocin, these are my great slides. Oxytocin is a peptide. It lives inside of the hypothalamus. It's comprised of 9 amino acids and 2 nuclei. But when it leaves the hypothalamus, it turns into a hormone. And that hormone, many of you women who've had children will recognize as the hormone that drives parturition, or the separation of the baby from the mother. And it's also the hormone that after birth, when the baby's suckling and breastfeeding, drives the contraction of the uterus. But when it releases into the general system, it becomes a neurotransmitter, doing incredible amounts of communication with the overall central nervous system. So if you haven't been, in high school science recently, you might have forgotten all the things that the central nervous system does. It starts in the brain, and it includes the brainstem and the spine and all the nerves that go out to the end of the fingertips and down to the toes. And the central nervous system regulates fear and pain and calm, well-being. In general, it regulates stress levels in the body. So we want to pay attention to the things that we do to regulate the central nervous system. So when it's missing oxytocin, what happens, and oxytocin can be permanently missing from the body. Like if you have an insecure attachment from birth, you might have pervasive low levels of oxytocin in your system. It's implicated in bipolar disorder, it's implicated in depression and schizophrenia, and it's implicated in overall insecure attachment, as well as heightened stress and anxiety. If you have a relationship, like a primary household relationship that has fear and distrust at its core, your oxytocin is very likely to also be permanently depleted. And if you have trauma or past traumas that are unresolved that keep kind of rearing their ugly head, you might have a low level of oxytocin depletion. But when it's intact, you feel great. So what happens when it's intact is that you have optimized your blood pressure, you have increased your healthy GI tract hormone, so digestion is better, cortisol or stress levels go down, and the pain threshold that you can handle goes up. You also have lower depression and lower anxiety. So in general, you feel good. You feel much better. Now, You can get oxytocin in a nasal spray. It's true. You can snort it. But oxytocin can be auto-generated in the body through stimulating the skin uh, all over the body, both haired skin and unhaired skin, the genitals, the mammary glands, the oral mucosa, and the GI tract. And all of those things, if you stimulate them, will give you a little oxytocin boost. So if you do that in the short term, each time you spend like 15 minutes stimulating one of those systems, you get about a 30-minute half-life. So remember back when you learned carbon dating, a half-life is half of the oxytocin is depleted in 30 minutes and then another half in 15, another half in 7.5. So you get, pretty good, almost an hour of well-being for 15 minutes of stimulation. So what are the things that you can do? So I started with the masturbation story. So I'm going to go back to that because masturbation is more visual aids, the Journal of Sexual Medicine. This is a study of 400 women, primarily in Europe, actually all in Europe, and they studied the frequency with which they masturbated. So almost all women, 1 to 3 times a week, much more than popularly held beliefs would indicate. And I'm going to read this to you here. It says, masturbation remains a highly stigmatized topic, perpetuating the silence and myths surrounding this autoerotic behavior. This is particularly worrisome given that much evidence points to the substantial positive impact of masturbation on people's overall mental, physical, and sexual health, as well as on the social development of adolescents. So when you ask women in this survey, when they asked women, they didn't say, they said sexual desire, but a lot of them said, I have no desire. I do this for stress regulation and mood regulation. And they were talking about it in the context of, I just feel like it balances my overall system. And in fact, that's exactly what it's doing. It's releasing a giant flush of oxytocin into the body. When women say they don't do that, the minority of women, but nonetheless quite a few, they say because they have a belief that's developed that sex is only for when you're partnered, or that they don't know how, or they don't like touching themselves. And that part made me sad because here's just one simple way that in the, with all the stuff we're under, you can calm yourself down. I did put a good chunk in our book, The Invitation, about touch and self-massage, and that starts on page 40 of the Invitation book, but on 48 and 49 in particular are different experiments in how to touch yourself. So I highly recommend that if that's something you're not doing. So number 1, pleasant mental experience. Number 2, masturbation. Number 3, meditation. Now, meditation is a panacea. It is a gift. It cures everything in a lot of ways because it reconnects you to your inner experience of your body. And it's sort of, I like to call it, how in Peter Pan, Wendy's job was to stitch Peter's shadow back onto him so that he would become whole. It's like the meditation practice will help us stitch all of the parts of ourselves together, the shadow, the body, the mind. And so that is an obvious benefit. But in terms of oxytocin release and overall stress reduction, it's not just any kind of meditation. There's meditations that combine sound and vibration with altruism, or thinking positively of others and giving your spirit to others, and appreciation. And if you do meditation with those 3 components, vibration, sound, altruism, appreciation, you up-level your oxytocin by more than 20%. So I found a study that was done on what's called arigato zen meditation, which arigato just means thank you in Japanese. But you have so many forms of meditation. Om Mani Padme Om in Buddhism, Om Hari Om. The Hare Krishnas have a meditation. You could do almost any amount of toning as long as you sustain it through the meditation. And the way that it goes, like we started this session with that diaphragmatic deep breathing. Inhale, exhale. as you're toning and you're breathing, you start saying thank you. Thank you for all of my life, everything that I've experienced. You start saying thank you and I'm sorry. You spend a good chunk of time just doing that. So visualizing any places where you have support or kindness in your life. So you do a little wave of that. Thank you. I'm sorry. I see you. I'm appreciative. I'm grateful. And that begins to regulate the system. And then you move into the same toning and breathing with remembrance of happy and joyful events. And then you end it with a stillness. So you come down and you lay down and you continue the or arigato or whatever you're going to chant. And just doing that for 20 minutes, like in those chunks, breathing, chanting, remembering positive events, being thankful, saying I'm sorry. It's like a little neurochemical joy factory that's going on in the body. So if you want, it doesn't cost anything. All you have to do is lay down, make noises, and remember all of your blessings. It's better than a drug and works better than a drug in all of these studies. Okay, so we have positive mental expression, positive mental experience, masturbation, meditation, particularly metta or kindness meditation. And then we have people. Now, the sex stuff comes later and the targeted massage comes later, but people, just being around people, the casual touch, the cuddling, both sexes, all ages, the physical contact in passing in your daily life. Now, love in the time of COVID makes that a little harder, but if you cohabit with people and you just brush up against them or you sleep with them or you cuddle with them, it's an incredible oxytocin generator. So just positive, warm interactions with people in your life generate oxytocin in the body. And not only does skin-to-skin contact with other people generate oxytocin, but your furry friends generate oxytocin. Your dog, if you have a dog and the dog sees you and recognizes you, just that, the approach of an animal that loves you already begins to release oxytocin. Now, they measure this through salivary testing and they measure it through other kinds of brain imaging and things like that and blood level oxytocin testing. But the idea that you can just see an animal that loves you coming at you and feel this rush is amazing. And then if you start petting them and stroking them, the interaction with the dog itself releases more and more oxytocin. So your dogs. I think someone commented on that earlier, and I was saying, yeah, there's actually multiple research studies. I found at least a dozen research studies on interacting with your animals and how that, taking the time to do that consciously, impacts oxytocin release. All right, onward. So now we have positive mental experience, meditation, masturbation, casual skin-to-skin contact with people, and there's our dog howling along with the sirens. We have a wolf dog. And then the next one is targeted massage. So it's not the kind of therapeutic massage that would work your joints and work your ligaments and like really, dig in. It's this kind of massage. Like the sweet, long arc, lightweight surface of the skin, light pressure stroking. Now if you don't have someone in your household who's doing that to you, then another way that you can generate that is by skin brushing yourself or by applying lotion or oil from your head to your toe in that same rhythmic, gentle, loving, stroking touch. So it doesn't even have to be from someone else. You can have auto-generated oxytocin response from self-touch. The next one after massage is suckling. So if you wonder about the oral fixation thing, like sucking on a lollipop, having a cigarette in your mouth, always having a soda or a coffee or something that you can play with orally, it's not just because you're addicted to the food or the calories or anything else. It's because stimulation of the oral mucosa of all of the lining of the mouth releases on a continual basis a steady flow of oxytocin. So of course this is related to eating, but you can also have objects and things that you play with that, like people have a lollipop or something they chew on. You can do that. However, when it is combined with eating, then you do this, the oral mucosa after you eat, then the food drops into the belly, and in the GI tract, another chemical called CCK is released, a hormone in the GI tract, which enhances even further oxytocin release. And so, what you have basically after you're eating, while you're digesting, is something that's called postprandial sedation. So, basically, you're knocked out. You feel really great. You're like zoned out because you're getting this double whammy of all the oxytocin hits from eating. And then, when it wears off, you have to eat again. So, for people who have attachment disorder or can't manage anxiety, this eating and oral play is a very predominant self-soothing mechanism. And so if that's one that you use well, amazing, congratulations on finding how to self-soothe. But if it's one you use or overuse and it creates other problems in your life, like how you feel in your body, then you can substitute it for one of the others. So we have how to generate oxytocin: pleasant mental experience, meditation, masturbation, skin-to-skin contact with other people, being with your animal and petting a dog, light pressure massage or self-anointing with oils, suckling and food intake. And then we have another category of motion. In women, rhythmic movement, dancing, flowing vinyasa, swimming will generate oxytocin and regulate cortisol. So it's not like punching motions, because it's not being released through the endorphins that come from exercise. It's actually being released through the rhythmic movement. So specific kinds of movement are enhancing the oxytocin release cycle. All right. And then the last one, of course, is sex and orgasm. Do a lot of that. So in the time of COVID and in the time of household isolation, there wasn't a single thing on that list that cost any money. That stuff only takes time. All you have to do is give yourself and your loved ones the spaciousness to connect and heal, the spaciousness to do touch, to do eye gazing, to meditate, to chant, to find space in order for your body to come into an auto-regulation that will allow you to hold your center even while the world's going a little bananas. Because when something's going bad outside in the world or something becomes uncertain, we have to be prepared, but we can be prepared with anxiety accompanying it, or we can be prepared with a centeredness accompanying it. And oxytocin, the love hormone, is our friend in facing anything that life has to offer with an inner stability. So I hope that is interesting to you and that you love it, and that you do these things. Well, thank you very much for joining my first at-home Facebook Live, and I hope I'll recap some of this stuff in the newsletter next week, and I'll see you soon. All right, pranams.